Hey, so the first thing that we're going to get off on foot today is this. What is the number one asset in any supply chain? The answer is coming up.
To the HPLS podcast. Live, relevant, and high performance information, conversations, and education weekly.
Hey, everybody. So, DJ, I'll introduce our guests in just a second here, but today is going to be awesome because today is the day where we actually start talking about the number one asset in this industry. And usually the first individual to get shit on, unfortunately, the individual that deals with everything while ourselves and our customers typically sit in our offices, our cubicles, our desks, wherever you want to call it, in coffee shops. Doesn't have to deal with all the four-wheelers, doesn't have to deal with everything. And of course, we're talking about drivers. And drivers today, I mean, we've got driver retention coach Ray Haight from the TCA with us here today. And for all y'all watching or listening, whether it's live right now at 10:01 a.m. on Wednesday the 24th, or if you're listening to this after, grab a pen, grab a pad, because today is going to be the day where you get all the strategies, tools, and tactics to actually create a real relationship with your suppliers. Ray, thank you so much for being here, brother. I really appreciate it. And that wasn't a brother because I forgot your name.
He said your name. He said your name first, Ray. He said your name first.
He said he was going to do that.
Exactly.
Salesman, right?
You know what, Ray? I mean, just if I can, I'll give the floor to you. Share with everybody, what you do, where you're from, and kind of your background, because I want everybody to understand the power and impact today's session is going to bring them.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, I'm a truck brat. Dad drove a truck, and he actually owned 3 trucks, but passed away very young, in his 50s. I ended up with those 3 trucks and a really good customer. In fact, I had dinner with the president of that business last week. He's in his 80s. Great guy, still going.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So, anyways, started a little business when deregulation happened called Southwestern Express. Got it up about 50 trucks, and then in the late 90s went down to Guelph, partnering up with McKinnon Transport, and we ran that up to 300 trucks. They had about 35 then, and 250,000 square foot of warehouse, and about 20% of our sales was logistics. We call it logistics. It was brokerage. And all through that, I got involved with the Truckload Carriers Association. Back then, McKinnon family was very political, and I was kind of allocated to the U.S. side of the border, and really enjoyed that relationship. What got me noticed down there, I eventually became chairman, was that we had 120% turnover through all this growth, and we ended up driving it down to 20% over a couple of years, and doubled our operating ratio. It became fun to go to work again. It was just it was good. But my goal was always to get out. When I was 50, both my parents were gone by then for me, so I always said if I'm not out at 50, it's because I didn't do it right, or I'm enjoying it so much that I don't want to get out. But I did get out, and I was enjoying it. But trucking, man, it's just holy, 60, 70, 80 hours a week. And now we're talking the other day about going out to dinner with your bride, and halfway through she's talking, you turn the placemat over and start making notes about something totally unrelated. So I decided to back from that, and I eventually I and another gentleman who helped me quite a bit wrote out a training procedure for trucking companies to reduce their turnover, and it's sold through Truckload Carriers Association. I am what they call their retention coach, so I'm part of the package. I do workshops, and then I do regular checkup calls with the carrier, see how they're doing. And I've enjoyed playing that role because it's given me insight into many, many trucking companies. And it's nice going in there the night before. Usually have dinner with the ownership and the leadership, and then do a workshop and walk the grounds and take a look and get a little peek behind the curtains, and then talk to the people. love to be left alone in the driver's room for a few minutes just to get that feel. And it's I really enjoy it. Right now, I'm doing consulting in retention and profitability for a few carriers on both sides of the border, and I really enjoy it. It's when you get to my age, it's very nice to get to the 10,000 foot level and say, hey, that's broke, fix it. That's broke, fix it. That's broke, and then get the hell out. Or get out of the way, kind of thing. You don't never get out. But so that's what I'm doing now. My wife and I have a home here in Florida, so we try to get out of the winter weather, and that's where I'm right now. So, anyways, that's a little snapshot.
Perfect. I'd like to kick it off with one of the most staggering statistics that you gave me when we were on our last call. I don't think many, if any, brokers, for lack of a better term, 99.8% don't truly understand how much it costs to get and retain a driver. Can you share some stats on that? And the reason I'll kind of pre-frame this a little bit, because for all you brokers and freight sales people out there that are watching and listening, the driver is the individual, obviously, that goes into the company that you're trying to sell. And when you hear how expensive this asset is, I truly hope it gives you a different opinion about information you need to know prior to drivers getting in. So Ray, I'll let you kick it off.
Well, it's funny that most companies don't have a really good handle on this. And I hear some ridiculous numbers, ridiculously low, because they're not factoring in everything that's involved. Typically, I think the latest numbers I've heard in the U.S. here is $6,000 to $12,000. But you got to add in your recruiting staff. You got to add in all your social media costs. You got all your testing. You've got orientation. You've got acclimation. You have all this, many companies, all this additional training. I do work with actually, I've got a call this Friday with the president of the largest cattle hauler in North America. After the individual gets their license, they've got 22 grand they spend on them. Just talking about Health Canada, about all the things you got to watch out for, about how to treat animals. 22 grand to hire. A very large chemical company I've done some work with in the U.S. And they're up around that number too, just on hazardous goods, but this is severely hazardous. So it depends. A company I'm dealing with out of Pennsylvania right now, they do load securement, a lot of coils, a lot of that, and I was in that business a little bit. So they're about 10 grand to hire. So it's a very, very large amount of money. And so obviously, if you can reduce that to any degree, you're going to put that money right to the bottom line. But having said that, when you get good at what you're doing and treating your drivers right, I'm just thrilled to death with the company I deal with that I stopped to see in Pittsburgh. They were 200% turnover short term, 150 long term. So they had red ink. They're now sub 25 on short term and sub 50 on long term and dropping quickly.
Wow.
But you can see what the difference is. So this is a 350 truck fleet. So they were hiring 700 drivers a year. Now they're down to under 100. But
that's crazy.
The psychology though is you don't ever reduce your recruiting effort. You've got this funnel. Make the funnel bigger. But down here, really make sure you're putting round pegs in round holes. This has got to be a good fit of a good quality individual that's going to be successful at your business. So you filter through a lot more. So, the expense is less on the training side, the orientation side. Yeah. On the other side of it, it's more because we got to get the filter filled, right? Or this funnel filled. So anyways,
and it's reallocating the cost.
5,000. Everybody says to me 5,000 or less. Usually they're not calculating all the factors in.
And from that point, then obviously, as you start looking at that, that's a huge asset. I mean, I know, let's call it a $10,000 price tag, just hypothetically across the board. At a $10,000 price tag, where you go pick up some crackerjack freight on the link, then your driver gets pissed off. That's not just an $800 load. That's a $10,800 load that's at jeopardy.
Exactly. Yeah,
For
yeah,
sure.
no.
Sure.
And
So
and he touched on something that we kind of touch on as well. He said about the round peg, round hole, filling that pipeline and getting it nice and full, but then really fine tuning and same thing we talk about with customers and making sure that they fit your mold. The same thing you were talking about with the drivers, and I think I think that's where a lot of companies probably tend to drop the ball is they just fill that funnel and then they're just trying to just
Yeah.
just
fill
flush
the
it out there.
seats.
See what happens.
Hmm.
Yeah, so no doubt about that. When you go in, or any of your listeners go in to sell a business, they're, sales is sales to some degree. What's the pain point? How can we fix your pain? And I'm going to find pain you don't even know you got if I'm good, right? and and I'm going to do that. And then if I'm a little better than that, I'll go up the food chain and I'll ask what the future looks like for the business. And are you expanding? Do you have other derivative or things that we can look at? The supply chain. Same kind of thing with the driver. The driver came to the business because they wanted to be successful. Success might just be a certain volume of money for them. It could be once you get up the food chain again, maybe this is a newer driver that he and his spouse want to buy a house. Okay, how can we help that situation? I know carriers that are looking at driver's files and finding a number of them. I might have mentioned this before, but they never finished post-secondary education, and they're helping them get those diplomas, those degrees. What is it that beyond just getting the paycheck and the home time, what else, how far up the food chain can we kind of get? Same idea with the customer.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And same idea. So right now I'd like to jump into I think a key section of driver retention, which is the type of freight they haul, the understanding of what kind of facilities they have, and dive into all of that. What are some of the things that we as salespeople can ask shippers, receivers that would help our service partners fill these lanes better or give them a better insight into the freight we're hauling, Ray?
Well, here's a concept that some carriers have taken on, and I love it. It's maybe getting to your carriers and asking each individual of them, what is the perfect customer? What is that customer? And I'll simplify it and say it's this is a van carrier. So here's the typical thing that we look for. What's the rate? What's the rate per mile? What's the potential margin, right? And then after that, what's the ideal weight? Is it 35, 40,000 pounds? Is this a drop hook? Is this a live load? What is the perfect thing for that situation? How quickly do they pay? Do they pay in 30 days, 15 to 30, or are they a 60-day payer? All those things have implications to them depending on how your business is set up. Now, extrapolate that a little bit further for the driver. The next step in that process is giving everything that driver needs to be successful. I was on the other end of this BS for 10 years. When you get an address and that's it in the middle of some metropolitan city, so why not provide the individual what's the not the four-wheeler way into the plant, but what's the truck route into the plant? How about
Exactly. Oh yeah.
know whether they can, this shipper, this receiver is certainly open to allowing you to spend the night, and they have security. This shipper has washroom facilities. This shipper has a cafeteria. Allowed on the dock, not allowed on the dock is really to the extent that it's been in the past, right? Then you find out what you're dealing with when you get there. But if you could inform a driver of those types of things before they got there, or no, we don't allow anybody to spend the night here. There's a motel around the corner that's truck friendly. Whatever you can do to make that driver's life easier, you're going to have a happier driver. You're going to have a happier customer. You're going to have a happier carrier. And they're not. The other thing with this model that I like, as soon as you don't check a basic box, right, that should impact the rate, because it's going to impact your turnover. It's going to impact potentially the amount of time you spend at that business. There's impacts. The time cost of money, they pay in 60 days. That's going to cost your operating line some money. These are all add backs for me.
Mm-hmm. And it's also when you identify that, I love the fact that you say, what's your perfect client?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Because as a sales rep, we can go in, and if we know, I'm a very big fan of reverse engineered logistics, where you get your top 5 or 10 suppliers that you work with, and you go and ask them these questions, like, what's your perfect client? Where's your perfect lanes? Where's your, what ideally is the number you need to be at? If they have this or don't have this, what number do you need to be at? And get all of those details. Then we as salespeople can actually go to market and become the sales force for our suppliers and ask these questions and identify those perfect clients. Because if it's a perfect client for your supplier as a broker, it's a perfect client for you because they're the ones doing the business, right? So it
Yeah.
Right.
makes sense across the board. And DJ and I talk all the time, Ray, about client profiles and client profiles and client profiles, because it's the people we deal with. It's not the logos.
Right.
And if we can, amalgamate our client profile with that ideal driver client profile, I think you've got the makings of the best business on the planet, because you're going to have happy drivers going into a facility that, okay, I understand. Even if they don't have a cafeteria, I get it, but at least I know I can use the bathroom. At least I know I can do this. At least I know they have a little driver lounge or something.
Sure.
Exactly.
I could
Yeah,
drop my
at least they
trailer and
have
go
a,
around the
at least they
corner,
have a
grab a
heads
bite
up
to eat.
too. Yeah, exactly. Where to grab they got to grab a bite to eat before they're going to be sitting there, or whatever the case is. They know the drivers. Yeah, and it's all about the team in the end. I love the asking that. Solomon BNI, it's a business networking group, and we do that. That's literally the whole approach is kind of that team idea and what's your ideal client or customer, so that we kind of know while we're out there to help them do the same. And using that concept for our carriers and for our suppliers, yeah, it's huge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, beforehand, gentlemen, we were talking about Ryan and some of the successes he's had with this approach, and he says, it's a game changer. Great insights, says Abhishek. I hope I pronounced your name properly, my friend. If I didn't and I hacked it, I'm so sorry. Jeff's got a question this morning, Ray. He says, how much goes into customer service and building relationships when you hire drivers? From your experience, do you think the number is one? Is the number one thing that destroys a relationship between a carrier and a customer? And then he goes on to say, I have several. What is yours? Just curious. So what's the number one thing that destroys a relationship between a carrier and a customer?
Number one with a bullet, everything is way behind that, is communication. And driver to a dock, salesman to a company, when you're not communicating and they don't tell you of changes, I tell people I communicate with you because I trust you, right? I ask your opinion because I value it. I don't say crap shit to you because I don't really care what you think. I just pick it up and get it out of here, will you? Communicate. It's number one with a bullet. And I'm coaching a lot of leaders of businesses now, and I get them thinking about this by saying, if you're not communicating to the circumstances around you, then you're wrong. You're just not controlling the narrative, right? No communication means I don't care about you. If you believe in this, then great, go at it. You're communicating to your communities. You communicate to your customers, your suppliers, law enforcement if you're a trucker. You're communicating to your drivers, your owner-operators, your people inside the wall. You are communicating. But if you're not doing it at any kind of an effective level and giving things of substance, then then the narrative is being controlled by someone else. It's not you. And that's wrong, right? Yeah. Number one thing I do when I go into customers to new trucking clients about retention is build a communications action team and get people from every area of the business involved in that, and use social media, use their internet, use newsletters, use everything that you can to get a message out there. Get a message. What narrative do you want out there?
And Ray, is part of that communication strategy internal as well? Because like when I was at an asset-based company, it was a smaller company, so like all the ops team knew every single driver by name, knew their family. It was a very small company. But I can imagine at these larger companies, do drivers sometimes become a number, and that communication strategy about, hey, listen, like this is what it costs to bring in an asset driver. This is kind of, guys, overall, we need this turnover in order to be profitable. Like, is that communication done inside big asset companies as well?
The good ones, yes. But the trick to that scenario is, what is your volume of turnover? The company I'm dealing with on a daily basis now has a limited volume of trucks per board. There's 35 per board, and they've got very low turnover. They know those guys. They know their name. They know them by name. But you put that same scenario out there with 40, 50 trucks and 100% turnover, you don't know who's on first, what's on second, or what the hell's going on half the time, right? And I got all the empathy in the world for those dispatchers. I was a dispatcher. When you start your own trucking company, you're the dispatcher, the biller, the whole friggin' bit, the safety guy. So I did that for quite a while, and it's very gratifying when it comes together. But yeah, they can know their own people. Communications inside is as important as any other area. Yeah, you got to communicate. Do your people know what your values are? Have you stated that? Have you asked them to participate in building a value statement? All that stuff is really touchy-feely, huggy stuff for a lot of truckers. But I tell you what, it really is the foundation of building trust. I say you build a sense of community within your business, now you got something. And how do you do that? By communicating and by, have your people's backs. I got your back, man. Yeah. I love Bison's right to decide as one of theirs. Every new driver goes there. You have the right to decide. If you're in an unsafe situation, don't call us. Don't get on the friggin' satellite. Get the hell out of there. Call us later. You have the right to decide whether you're threatened or not. That's empowering. That tells them, driver, we trust you. We trust you. Let us know as soon as you can. Get the hell out of there. They've got a lot of those types of things. They're great communicators. Great communicators.
Gary Salisbury says, "Hey, Ray." He knows. He says, "Hey, I know that guy."
Gary's a great old friend of mine. He was.
He's a good man. He's a good man.
Another past chairman. We've tipped a couple of drinks together. I just tell Gary lives so far back in the woods in Arkansas, he doesn't have any neighbors behind him.
he says, "Hey, Danny, DJ, your guest this morning is a great guy." Look at that. You're getting it everywhere, right?
Look at that.
We've got another question. What advice do you have for someone who is looking to start a trucking business in Canada and Ontario? Where do I start? Any advice would be greatly appreciated. Where would they start, Ray?
Well, I don't know the history of this individual. If there's somebody who's been driving for a while or they own their own truck, that's pretty obvious. It's expensive right now to go get your own insurance. The authorities, not much of a challenge. That's pretty easy getting insured. The market has gone absolutely nuts.
I've heard some horror stories lately.
Well, if you're a good insurance risk, you're probably going to, experience 10 to 20% increase. If you're a poor risk, sky's the limit if you can stay in business. So, and all that's driving a lot of, I see Salisbury's back up there. It's driving a lot of carriers into the, offshore markets and those types of things. And I get it. We were in an offshore captive, and it was helping. It helped us take the volatility out of the market. But if you're a new person starting out, I had a lot of friends who were owner operators, and I had 3 trucks going that my dad didn't give me. He passed away, and I ended up with them. But these guys were always bugging me for freight. So eventually, I still remember, this is an aha moment. Owner operator, yeah, I got a load. We were going to California out of Ontario, and I gave him the load, and I kept $50. Now these guys are used to sneaking around scales from Ontario to California, so that was just part of the thing we did back then. But I remember getting that check. I went to the bank, I wrote a check, and I had $50, and I didn't do jack shit. Yippee! This is a good deal. This is a good deal. And it kind of went from there. That was an aha moment for me.
Awesome. So So, Ray, okay, I want to bring this back to sales because I think there is such a connection between your knowledge, the driver retention, driver recruitment, relationships with suppliers. What are some of the biggest things you hear about that asset companies say about brokers?
Oh, this is a clean show, right? I can't.
No, you can. No,
No, no,
go for it,
yeah.
brother.
Let her
I'll
rip.
even create a video. We're gonna have a raise
I know
rant
it.
here for a second, everybody.
You know what?
Raise rant.
The good ones are the good ones pay on time. They've got decent rates. They understand the operating costs of a truck, and they don't jerk you around. Unfortunately, that's not the majority in my experience. Majority is something much subpar than that. And we were an irregular route carrier with 300 trucks, so we were all over the place, and we had about 15% of the freight that we hauled we had to buy. But typically, it was our slowest paying freight. It was the worst revenue per mile. We got in the habit. Of making every one of our dispatchers said, "I need another $100." Didn't matter what the rate was, and every one of them said, "What's the fuel surcharge on that?" And so we had different scripts to make sure that, and we were a load broker too, basically, but we paid within 15 days. Here's what our gig was, and this is how we sold it. We did what I call shame sales. We would go into a customer and say, "Here's how we screen our carriers," and we did this shit. Here, we have their insurance, we have their operating authority. We have got intimate with them. We know them. They're held to our standard as an asset-based carrier. If they fail, here's step 1 is this, step 2 is this, step 3 is that, step 4, you're gone. We will ensure that you are getting a very, very good service from using us as a broker. If we can't supply you, we call them red trucks. If we can't supply you a red truck, we will get you a replacement truck. And we used to tell our carriers, for me, the number one thing in the brokerage that really kicked us off, that on the customer side. On the other side, 2 weeks payment. We knew that our average receivable from a load broker was 60 days. We paid in 2 weeks. Now, we had cash to do that. We also told the little guys, you come to our window after you deliver that thing to our physical facility, and we'll cut you a check on the spot with a clean bill of lading. You get those guys caught up in your cash flow when they're used to getting paid in 60 days.
Mhm.
Man, we didn't go looking for people to truck our stuff. They were calling us every day. What do you got today? They would fax us where their available trucks were so we could fill them. We're paying better than their own customers were paying. Number one, cash flow. Cash is king, right?
Yes,
But again, when we went into a customer, we would lay out exactly our screening process, all the data that we've got on the carrier, and hold them to our standard. And we did. So that answers your question.
We had Dean Crook on last week.
I love him.
Awesome
Yeah.
man. And
I talked to him a couple weeks ago. I'm a hero. He's a hero of mine. He's got a way of taking the most complicated shit you can think of, and even a guy like me can understand it. I love it.
And just simplifying it. It's crazy.
Yes.
And we were talking about the relationship between data and selling and driver shortage and all this kind of stuff. And he brought up some scary statistics about dwell time on docks, and Warner can add 14 or 18% more freight to their lineup if they just 30 minutes each truck comes off a dock or whatever. What are you seeing in that world on kind of the delays on dock increases, and what do you see as some of the conversations that are being having, or is there a conversation being had?
There is, but it ebbs and flows with capacity, right? I mean, when we're in the driver's seat, we can go and talk about yield. We can talk about, you're going to give me $2 a mile and it's a 200-mile trip. That's good cake. But the yield sucks because it's 2 hour on and 2 hour off. I've lost all that revenue time. So the conversation through Freight Waves and some of their products, it gets around to, and KSM is another one. Sapper Miller, they've got a consulting business, and they talk about yield, but they talk about the rate with the amount of time that's involved in that. Don't get enamored with jeepers creepers, it's $3 a mile. Well, you know, it's going to take you all friggin' day, and you're only getting 300 miles, and you could do this other thing over here and really make a. Meanwhile, the driver's sitting there with his finger in his ass getting PO'd, right?
Yep.
So, you know, all those conversations are great to have, and I think the more important thing for me is to understand what that yield equals to time really is. You know, as far as getting compensated for it, again, it's back to capacity. If shippers have the you know, the thumb on the carriers, you know, 2 hours free at each end, and we'll get to you when we can. Don't be 5 minutes later. You can come back tomorrow. That's bullshit.
Yeah.
You know, I used to, TCA, Truckload Carriers Association, did a pretty good piece of work some years ago with NIT League, Industrial Transportation League, and they put together a best practices trifold. So a lot of the people that I deal with, I try to get them to ask TCA to get a copy or copies of those things. Every one of my salespeople had one. It's how a carrier should treat the customer and how a customer should treat the carrier. Now, it's a bit dated right now, and they're redoing it, but it's a great document.
You know, and I probably see, you know, so I look at it like this, because you're absolutely right. I remember when I first started in the industry, and it'd be like, you know, you're running an Austin, Texas to Toronto, and I think it was like $1,600 or something at that point in time when I first got into it. And then I was blown away because everybody wanted like $1,000 out of Jersey to Toronto. I'm like, well, hold on, that math doesn't make sense. Like, none of that makes sense. It should be on that kind of, you know, distance. Then you add in, you know, the 2 hours at each end. As a sales rep, I would suggest all of us that are talking on any level, I don't care how long the trip is, if you don't have a full understanding of how long it takes to load and unload, realistically load and unload, I think you're missing a huge boat when it comes to relationship development and
Absolutely.
understanding your business. Like, I know for a fact, I speak to so many operations people, and in operations, they say, yeah, 99% of the salespeople have no friggin' clue how this business actually runs. You know,
Well,
like, they go in, they say, where do you go? Where do you go to? Can I give you a number? They give a number, and that's the conversation. Hey, the number works. Okay, you do the business. And then all of a sudden operations finds, well, you got to do this, 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 and this.
Yeah.
And if operations doesn't find out because they don't ask the questions, then the driver goes in, and all of a sudden the driver's expecting A, and they get A, B, C, and D, which then pisses them off even more. Then they got to sit, then they got to, and it just kind of compounds.
So what I would do if I was, you know, in the business down in the weeds right now, I think I would arm every one of my sales people with a fact sheet. And the fact sheet would lay out all the things we've discussed. What's the wait time? What's the hours? How flexible is the delivery and the pickup? What's the average wait time? The washrooms, cafeteria. I would have a fact sheet right down to the receivable. And then when it comes time to get back to you know, the facility and put a number on this, you've got the whole picture. You've got it right there. And you've also started the relationship with the driver, because other than the receivable amount, you know, they don't give a shit about that. You know, you've got everything they're going to need to know: the weight, the product, how it's skid on, all that stuff. I mean, I get a fact sheet, and I think a lot of salespeople have that, but it's not near as encompassing as it should be. You know, they're saying $500,000 worth of sales, and I'm in for 5 points. Cool, let's go. Shit, Jesus.
And not only that, I mean, you have your fact sheet. If you start adding what we talked about today, you know, what kind of amenities does it have for a driver? Is my driver allowed to use the bathroom? Is there a vending machine or a food truck or a cafeteria or something there my driver can get a bite to eat? Is there somewhere from the park? Is there security? Is it secured? Can he sleep there? And the way I see it, because especially after our conversation, you go into a customer and you ask these questions, I think it actually puts you on a different level than somebody just going in there and asking 3 or 4 questions. And then you bring that to your supplier, and you've just put yourself on a higher level than any other broker calling your supplier.
But
and
you know what, like, Dan, if you know, I ran this company that had this big turnover numbers I mentioned. I asked them how they went to market. We went, well, we find out the lanes we want, and we go bid them. And dear old friend of mine that worked for me for quite a while, Donnie Urquhart, he passed a little while ago, but Donnie would say, you're selling from an empty shelf. You know, you're selling nothing. And then you're going to go have a beer with your buddy and bitch about the rates. You know what?
Yes.
Right? Am I right?
Yeah,
That's how it
yeah,
happens. So you go into that same customer with saying, here's our turnover, here's our CSA scores, here's our commitment to community, here's our commitment to the industry, TCA membership, ATA membership, here's all of these things that we do, and here's why we're safe. And how we, even down to how we screen people to get into our business. I love an old saying, Danny Baker, who I love. Anybody's not heard of him, look him up, Danny Baker. I don't know what his website, but it's Danny Baker Trucking. And he's so down to earth. But he was working with a company out of Pennsylvania again. I sent my ops manager down there. And one of the things that Danny had this company doing was when they interviewed the drivers, when they got done, the guy had the paperwork right. Now, the driver's files look good. He said, okay, now tell us why you're good enough to work for our business. Talk about a paradigm shift, eh?
Wow.
$10,000 sign-on bonuses that are all bullshit, all the rest of that stuff. Tell us why you're good enough to join our team. Let us know, because we really protect our people and we want the right people. Tell us how. Tell us why. Neat stuff. I love that.
The right people on the bus makes a big difference.
It's called Ride for the Brand. You ride for the brand.
Go.
You got your back, and if you don't have your people's back, shame on you to begin with, and congratulations on your turnover.
Yeah.
You know what? I mean,
that's a revolving door, right?
Hey, and you know what? At 10 grand a pop, you want that door sealed shut as quick as possible. Let me tell you, because very quickly you could spend, $100,000, $200,000 a year just on driver retainment or driver recruitment, and you got nothing to show for it.
Well, let me get in the weeds. We're getting close. Let me get in the weeds on that one, though.
Go for it.
As far as I'm concerned, the number associated with recruiting a driver is significant, no doubt about it. But I tell people that it's incremental to where the money is. Where the money is in safety, right? Less claims, a more solid workforce. We talked about insurance is a safer carrier. Ask any insurer. It's a fact. Assets. What do you think the value of a rolling asset is that's had one driver in it over its life cycle compared to maybe having 10, right? Familiarity with systems, age account, accounts receivable, time cost of money. When you have a solid workforce, they know the workflow, they know the paperwork flow, your billing is quicker, right? You can go on in every area of your business, and this granular money in all these different areas, maintenance. Everybody is in this industry. If you've had 10 drivers in one truck, what's it cost to maintain that truck, let alone, once it's residual, it's time to rotate the vehicle out. It just goes. Operations. If you've got 50 drivers with 20% turnover, you're training 10 compared to 100. That gives you time to focus on the KPIs, revenue per mile, empty miles, whatever it is. That solid workforce allows you to train people. It just, to talk about the cost of a hire is one thing. It's not where the real money is. It's really not. It's all those other places that add up to millions of dollars. And it just drives me nuts. It's delusional. I get on the friggin' rant on this shit. Pisses me off. If you look at ATRI's top 10 from a couple of weeks ago, they publish every year for the last 5 years. What's the number one issue in the industry? The number one issue in the industry is not enough drivers. The number two is driver retention. How friggin' delusional is that shit? Really? I say, here's the number. Here's what's interesting to that analogy would go to my golf game. You know why my golf game isn't better? My handicap's not lower? Because I don't have enough golf balls.
Yeah, I see what you mean. I see what you mean.
Exactly.
I know when I was at the smaller asset-based company, we went from about 12 trucks to 125. And I remember the number one thing was when we just brought in drivers to fill seats, we found our trailer repairs and expenses went up because instead of using a Jake brake or downshifting, they'd use trailer brakes to stop their trucks, just to kind of save, and that was just one little piece. I remember my safety and compliance manager saying, she noticed, was it like a 27% increase just in maintenance when it was kind of a slip seat deal as opposed to one driver, one truck.
See, that shit bothers me too, because these are not safe drivers that are, they're not driving properly. They're circumventing the way they should drive just to think they're saving a couple of bucks on a brake pad. Like I don't, that kind of stuff. That there's so many tools out there now that are available that you can screen people with. The carrier that I mentioned earlier, they're doing it. It's a behavior modeling tool. It'll tell you whether the individual is anxious. Do they follow rules? Do they take direction? All those things are precursors to character. Do they care about safety? I guarantee if you got a driver that doesn't care about safety, this is an individual whose character is probably not something you want in your building, let alone your family drive. And you can see this stuff before you let them into your business. So there's so many, the PSP reports in the US and the driving records, this all paints a picture. It all paints a
100%. Yep, 100%. Ray, we're respectful for your time, so we're gonna get moving out here. But you know what? One last comment from me to every single logistics sales rep out there: be the driver-centric sales rep. And I believe wholeheartedly in 2022, if you are the driver-centric sales reps on both sides of the fence, you will not have a capacity issue, because every company would rather give you their equipment knowing that your number one priority is making sure the driver's taken care of. And listen, I don't feel it any issue to say to a customer, my number one priority is the driver, because when the driver's happy, your freight gets where it needs to go damage free. It gets there happy. Driver doesn't piss anybody off, and there's no issues. So we got to make the driver happy. Here's the reason I'm going to ask all these questions, and use this session that we just had, whatever you're watching it on LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, or you're watching it later in the podcast, rewind it and listen to this again. Very important.
Yes, I agree.
And Gary says, great job, Ray.
Hey,
great
Gary,
job.
I'm a big Gary fan. Everybody is. He's a great guy. So I appreciate that, Gary. Thanks.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Ray.
Appreciate you being here, Ray.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, folks.
Take care.